And joining us right now, the Rothman Orthopedics guest line from Inquirer.com, from WIP Radio. You know him. Chances are you very much love him. Mr. Marcus Hayes. What's going on there, Marcus?
Not too much. How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, and I really try not to let this affect the rest of my day, but it's on repeat, Marcus, in my brain from Daryl Morey's press conference. We have a roster built to win. We have a roster built to win. And the thing about it was, I think it was Deuces Rogers that asked a question to 6ABC, and he said, he asked a question about requirements for a new head coach. So it had nothing to do with the answering the question. It was all about the roster. He took it to the roster and involuntarily said, we have a roster built to win. I think evidence would suggest they don't, unfortunately.
Well, I think he was saying we have a roster built to win, but we didn't have a coach that could win with this roster that I've built, because I built the roster. I didn't hire the coach.
Oof. That's a great point. I look at this roster, though, and I know the news has come out. I saw the report out there that it looks like James Harden is planning to opt out of his contract with that player option. That makes me feel better about the Sixers' future. Does that make you feel better about the Sixers' future?
I think he's still going to opt out, and this will make you feel horrible.
Oof.
He's going to want a 4-year, $210 million deal, and they sound like they're ready to give it to him. So no, that does not make me. I don't care if they win, lose, or dissolve the franchise. But if you're a Sixers fan, and I think most Sixers fans are kind of like, well, we tried James Harden. He's better than Ben Simmons, who was giving us nothing. We tried it. It cost us, $70 million. We gave it the old college try. James is 33 years old. He's averaging 20 points a game in the playoffs after averaging 30 points a game in the playoffs up until 2021. He's an older player, and he has to play a different role. He's tried. We had a Hall of Fame coach who was a point guard who tried to convert him into being a true point guard with other pieces around him, and it worked okay. It was pretty good. They were a pretty good team. They lost probably to the best team, which isn't a very good team, but it's probably the best team left, maybe the best team in the NBA. Probably not the best team if Giannis is healthy, but they're good enough to win games, and they're good enough to win series. But, the question you asked a second ago, Daryl Morey thinks they would have won the series if Doc Rivers wasn't the coach. It's just that simple. The question you're asking now is, if you're a Sixers fan, should you be happy for more James Harden down the line? My observation would be certainly not, and absolutely not at $50 million a year.
I could not agree with that thought more. You saw what happens in Game 6, what happened in Game 7, the explanation that was given after both those games. After Game 6, you heard Joel Embiid said, well, as a big, it's hard for me to demand the ball. And I'm thinking, how did you win the MVP award if it's that difficult?
Well, he was demanding the ball. Yeah. He was just not receiving the ball from James Harden.
Okay. All right. So Joel
Embiid said, it's hard. I didn't touch the ball in the last 4 minutes. He didn't say, I took myself out of the game for the last 4 minutes. Right. He said, I didn't touch it. Mm-hmm. That's saying that my teammates did not give me the ball when I presented myself as available.
Gotcha. Understood. So when it comes to the performance of James Harden and Joel Embiid, I find it difficult. How does one look at the coach and say that's the problem when you look at the stars that didn't play up to snuff, especially in those 2 games?
Well, to play devil's advocate, I don't think it was the coach. I think the coach put them in a position to win. James Harden shot the ball twice in the second half of Game 6, 2 times. Then he blamed the refs. Okay, mm-hmm. In Game 6 and 7, he made 7 field goals and had 10 turnovers. 2 games combined. Okay, this is not Doc Rivers' fault that James Harden performed at this level. It's James Harden's fault. Now, if Daryl Morey wants to believe that another coach would have gotten more out of James Harden and therefore the collective, I guess that's his prerogative. Josh Harris has given him the keys to the kingdom to do with to do as he pleases. He's replaced the president. He's signed PJ Tucker. He's signed James Harden. He signed he traded for DeAnthony. He believes that he is, and I guess he has to believe that. He believes that his formula will work. And honestly, if you're Josh Harris, you hire him to give him the keys to the kingdom. So you and I can, bitch and moan all we want about, well, James Harden isn't this, Joel Embiid should be this. Daryl Morey's making these decisions because Josh Harris is letting him.
Right.
And remember when we used to complain about Joe Banner and Jeffrey Lurie interfering with the front office? Okay, well, either change the front office or change the ownership. Neither of those things is going to change. So I know that's sort of tangential, but the reality for me is you have a general manager who believes in James Harden and has believed in James Harden for 13 years.
It sounds like to me, when you throw out the numbers, especially $210 million, and you're talking about a 4-year deal for James Harden, a depreciating asset, in my opinion, and one that hasn't been able in his own career, whether Houston, whether Brooklyn, or whether obviously here in Philadelphia, really put forth that deep playoff run. I just can't have confidence in the 76ers future that the process in any way, shape, or form will ever really pay off. And I can't help but feel this way.
The process has always been a fraud.
Oh, no, I don't disagree with that. In terms
it's a losing culture. Joel Embiid is a losing player. Daryl Morey has won exactly as much as James Harden has won.
No, I agree. Yeah,
I went out and hired this guy to win here, having not won for 10 years in Houston. So yeah, the process for me after about the 5th or 6th year was just a joke, because at that point you were getting very, very little return. So the process has been dead for me for, it'll be 11 years if they win it all next year.
Oof.
So it was always a farce.
Okay. Fair enough.
I think we're sort of in the second phase of it. At this point of the process, you were supposed to have contended for championships for multiple seasons. The problem is the gemstone of the process has been out of shape, injured, and soft. That's the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. And they hired a tough guy coach. They signed a tough guy player. And that didn't change that much. Joel Embiid disappeared in Game 7. Joel Embiid had to be coaxed through Game 5 by PJ Tucker. Joel Embiid's going to be 30 next year. He's a veteran. He's a perennial all-star, and he's never been even close to a champion.
No, I agree on all counts. But I'll focus on Joel Embiid right now since we're on that subject. When it comes to what's next for the Sixers team, I mean, last year I think a lot of people would have said, you're crazy if you even entertain the idea of trading Joel Embiid. This year, I think it's something that people have to really think about in terms of entertaining offers out there. What do you think of the idea of just blowing the whole thing up and starting over?
Well, they should be further away from considering trading Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid's become better the last 3 seasons. He's gotten in better shape. He's been a better player. He had his best season. Joel Embiid's not the problem. The satellites are the problem, and the chief satellite was James Harden. I think it was 3 years ago. My contention was, if you believe that Ben Simmons can win a championship for you, then you and I, we just disagree. If you want to win a championship, you need a point guard that can do 3 things. Number 1, he can handle the ball without turning it over. Ben Simmons is a turnover machine. Number 2, he has to be able to be at least a semi-threat from outside. And Ben Simmons wasn't that. Number 3, you have to be a pretty versatile defender. You have to be able to guard at least 2 players on the court. Optimally, the scoring guard on the other team. And I said, I would trade Ben Simmons right now for Drew Holiday. And a year later, Drew Holiday was a champion. And I was laughed out of the room. Ben Simmons was supposed to be an MVP candidate. Ben Simmons was supposed to be the new Magic. Ben Simmons didn't want to shoot the basketball. And Drew Holiday, who they could have had for his entire career, who they traded for the rights to draft Nerlens Noel, the very first piece of the process puzzle, Drew Holiday was available, and they said no.
Yeah. Drew Holiday, you look at a bunch of guys. I mean, hindsight looking at the draft is what it is, unfortunately. But when it comes to the new head coach, I'm going to switch gears and talk about the next head coach of the Sixers. Is there a name that's been mentioned or a name that maybe hasn't been mentioned yet that makes the most sense to you to take over from Doc Rivers that can actually get more out of these players?
In 2020, I suggested that Dawn Staley be the new Sixers head coach. She said she wasn't interested. Since then, she's interviewed in Portland. I still think she'd be the best option as the new Sixers head coach. That would cost you James Harden. James Harden would not play for Dawn Staley, I don't think. But I don't know who he'd play for. The best coach out there, I believe, the most versatile, innovative, bright coach out there, I believe, is Nick Nurse, who was fired from Toronto, but won with Kawhi in a very strange situation, beat a very good Sixers team with, I think, an inferior team that went on to win the NBA championship. He's probably the best coach out there for my money. That said, one of the interesting things in Doc Rivers' thank you message to Philadelphia was, he was astonished that the Sixers fans and media were so intense and critical. I'm not sure Nick can handle that sort of intensity and criticism, having had one job in Toronto. Being in Philadelphia and being a coach of a pro team in Philadelphia is traumatic. And I'm not being facetious. It's a traumatic thing. You are disrespected. You are treated unfairly. You have to deal with a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about. But this is true in every market. But you can't bully the Philly media and the Philly fans, which is what coaches who are confronted with those situations do in other markets.
Understood. When it comes to the rest of this roster, though, it seems like the Harden Embiid thing, from what you're gathering, is not a far cry. And from what Daryl Morey told us today in his press conference, that yes, he would like to have James Harden back. He said he couldn't get into details about it, but it seems like we're in for more of the same, and it's all depending on whoever's going to take over for Doc Rivers.
Let's be very clear about something.
Yeah.
Whoever takes over for Doc Rivers will be hired by James Harden. James Harden, they're not going to hire a coach that's going to cost them James Harden. James Harden may not choose the coach, but he will at least have to endorse the coach, because Joel Embiid has no say. We've come to realize that Joel Embiid, who endorsed the heck out of Doc Rivers after Game 7, to me, wanted Doc Rivers to stay, and he didn't. And James Harden didn't want him to stay, and he's gone. So whoever comes in, I know Daryl Morey said, number one, he said, James had no influence. James had a good relationship with Doc, even though in answering my question, he said, it's okay.
Yeah, right.
And not answering the second part of my question, do you want him back? He just walked away. Daryl Morey refuted that by saying, oh, well, it was an emotional moment and, heat of the moment. It was the same heat of the moment, emotional moment for Embiid, who endorsed him. Okay. Number one. Number two, Daryl Morey said, even if James Harden had said, I won't play for Doc, it didn't affect his decision. Well, that's ridiculous. And then Daryl Morey said, neither Embiid nor Harden will have any influence over who the new coach is. Again, that's just ridiculous. Of course they will. Why would you hire a coach that Joel Embiid says, I don't want to play for?
No, I 1,000% agree. On that note, to further that, the name Mike D'Antoni's already been mentioned. What would you put a percentage-wise likelihood of Mike D'Antoni possibly becoming the Sixers' next head coach?
If they hire Mike D'Antoni as the head coach, I'd be surprised if the stadium deal ever goes forward.
Wow.
It would be so incredibly unpopular. It would be so incredibly pandering. Mike D'Antoni has been an abject failure. He really has been.
Yeah.
He's not a very good basketball coach, and he's been given lots of talent and lots of chances. I don't know him from Adam, but I know his results and I know his methods and I know his theories, and they are flawed and failing. So I don't know that the Sixers ownership group would allow Daryl Morey to rehire Mike D'Antoni in Philadelphia as he employed him in Houston. So it's an interesting name, but it would be super unpopular.
I agree with that. The future of Tobias Harris, if anything's going to change in this roster, do you think he has played his last game as a 76er?
I don't know. The NBA, you have to trade money for money, right? He's making $38 million. Who's going to take $38 million at Tobias Harris? For what? You don't have assets you can trade with him. So, and Tobias Harris wasn't the problem. He really wasn't. Tobias Harris has earned his money. when given his opportunities, when he given touches, he's earned his money. He's changed his role 3 different times. He's been a good teammate. It was Tobias Harris after the Miami Heat series last year who said the Sixers need to get tougher physically, mentally, and emotionally. And Tobias Harris has become a better defender, not a great defender, but a better defender. One of the big, issues I had with Doc this year, especially in the playoffs, is when Joel's out of the game, Tobias has to be option 1. He has to get the ball. Tyrese Maxey is not a good half-court basketball player yet. He's okay, but he's not good. His value comes in transition. It comes in broken plays. It comes as a slasher off other people. Tobias Harris is a very, very good half-court basketball player. And he's not worth $38 million, but he's also not worth nothing.
Do you see any excitement in the near future for Sixers fans if, this deal with James Harden does go through?
If James Harden returns on a max deal, I don't think they're going to sell many games out. I think there's going to be there's going to be a big backlash. People aren't interested in the, pity pat. James Harden took an 8-second violation in the playoffs because he was walking up the court. I mean, this Philly is a really good basketball. Philly's a better basketball town than it is anything else. There's more basketball knowledge in Philadelphia than football and baseball, maybe combined.
Totally agree.
Really smart basketball town. You don't see people, unless it's a press situation, you don't see middle schoolers take a 10-second violation. And you got an NBA professional walking up the court taking an 8-second violation. It's always 7.5 seconds when he goes over half court. I mean, it was a meaningless moment, but that is the antithesis of what Philadelphia wants in its athletes. So if they sign him, I think they're going to realize a serious backlash. I mean, people are going to give up their season tickets. They're going to stop going to the games. They're going to stop buying beer. They're going to stop parking. And, all of a sudden, the guy you're overpaying is costing you money.
Right. Marcus Hayes, I know, look, hey man, my heart's still with this Sixers team, and it does hurt when they make bad decisions. I have to admit that to you. You know me. That's the way I am. And I'm with you. I agree with everything you're saying as far as the future of this team. It is not bright right now, unfortunately. But please, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're reading everything from Marcus Hayes, Inquirer.com. Listen to every word, read every word he's got on the 76ers as well as everything else. Doing a great job as a columnist for the Philadelphia Inquirer. Marcus, always great catching up with you, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Absolutely. Marcus Hayes joining us on the Rothman Orthopedics Guest Line.